1. No, this didn't happen today, but around October last year. Yes, I am German. After the relationship with my ex had been fading for months, we finally broke up. I was more than ready to try online dating and meet someone who didn't love physics more than me. I invited my gay friend over for support. We opened a bottle of champagne, and the alcohol soon facilitated the process of filling in all those obscure questions on the profile form. If you've tried online dating, you may know that choosing a username can be a tough one. Or maybe you don't. Sex in a Box the Cat 1985? I was scrolling through a lot of pictures while choosing the right ones to upload, and because I had done a 6-week bike tour shortly before, there were tons of pics of me wearing my helmet. Helmets save lives, guys, be safe. We tried a few usernames that got rejected when I had the epiphany that Helmtroud is kinda cute. Helmet, get it? But it wasn't bad enough to only sound like a 70-year-old. I wanted to attract the kind of guy who has enough of a sense of humor that he'll assume it's not my real name, but wouldn't be too superficial to care if it was. I just get online dating. I chose Helmtroud in a combination with my birth year, 88, to make it sound like I'm trying to be a real bae. Better not post the exact name in order to violate any rules. So off I went into this world of dicks thrusting in infinite directions. Things were going pretty well, although I did get the odd message here and there that I couldn't make sense of, such as, "Blonde and blue-eyed was the least I expected with that username." I didn't think much of them, and they got washed away pretty quickly in the wave of semitone torsi and Lust so Natans. What a time to be alive. It wasn't long until my first date rolled around. The evening was already moderately awful, when I must have said something meaningful like, "I'm 28, so blah," and the following conversation ensued. "You're 28? Mm-hmm. So you were born in 1988? Sure. So that's why you put the 88 in your username? Of course. What did you think it meant? You know, certain crowds use numbers for letters of the alphabet. That makes 8 an H, and 2 8s would be HH. Suddenly, those blonde jokes made sense. Things were coming together. Maybe certain year groups in Germany just don't put their birth year into their usernames, and I never realized. Also, what the fuck was this guy doing on a date with me if he thought I had chosen a name that openly displayed my support for fucking Nazis? This is the main fuck up, but it wasn't quite over yet. As soon as I got home, I wanted to delete that horrible account, but in order to transfer all the golden answers I had so carefully typed out in my drunken state earlier, I had to create a new one first. Now, on that website, it's forbidden to have 2 identical accounts, and mine were the exact same apart from the username. Something happened that halfway in I wasn't able to access the new account anymore, and it got stuck with a really awful typo for about a week, that the grammar Nazi inside me found hard to bear. Ho ho. I ended up writing a flustered email to customer support, and eventually was able to correct the mistake and delete the Nazi-infected account. Only when I transferred everything from my old account, I only saved like 2 to 3 contacts. The guy who was gonna become my boyfriend was not one of them. Guess I didn't have great hopes for us at the time. Maybe I should have checked his profile when things got serious, because I think he may have stated that he was only looking for short-term dating. He's from the US, and just came to the Hauptstadt der Bewegung for 2 years. I honestly can't remember if this was in his profile, but for the sake of this sub, I'd better milk the fuck up out of the TIFU. So maybe I would have confronted relationship goals earlier if I had read his profile, if I hadn't deleted my account, if I hadn't made it a Nazi one. He did break my fucking heart when he said that he couldn't see a future with me. On a more cheerful note, I told one of my colleagues this story. He made me tell the whole party on his birthday, and now all the very German, very earnest lawyers I work for enjoy calling me Helmtroud. 2. This happened 11 years ago in 2006. To begin, there are a few things that need to be known. Due to a series of pretty serious events, I was placed in what was referred to as anger management 3 years prior, a class that existed outside of and completely cut off from the normal classes and was technically a form of special education. I was a huge kid, being 6'2" and 300 pounds at the age of 15. I had 4 years of gymnastics under my belt from my elementary years. After spending what felt like forever being stuck in this class, with the same socially unstable kids day after day, I was very much looking forward to graduating. I didn't belong there. I was given an ultimatum that was meant to scare me into leaving the district, and they just weren't prepared for how stubborn my family was. I had been exceptionally well behaved, even having been given a few awards through the year for generous acts, and as a result I was given special permission from the principal and superintendent to attend the normies graduation trip that was normally forbidden to any person in the special education program. I had no idea this was even happening until a day before the document turn-in cutoff, so I was in a scramble to get my documents together so I could end this miserable era on a good note. When I turned in my papers, the teacher accepting gave me a nasty look and informed me that children in my class weren't permitted to go. This pissed me off, but I held my temper and informed her I had special permissions, to which she scoffed and waved me off. Nothing else I could do about it, so I left. I get a call about a week later from my principal informing me that I hadn't confirmed my seat for the trip. I was confused and informed him of what happened. The good guy that he is, he gave me an let me call you back. He did, informed me that everything was resolved, and told me where to be to get the buses. Based on his tone, I'm fairly certain that teacher was let go. Come time to meet at the buses, I see a couple friendly faces, people I hadn't seen in a long time, and we get to talking. Good times. Even sat next to a few of them for the ride from AZ to Cali. We stopped at Knott's Farms for the day. I ended up grouped with a good number of the kids I grew up with, and we just rode about every ride and roller coaster and agree that we'll try the same at Disneyland. The day went by quick, but we had accomplished our goal and made our way to the hotels. Being that I was a last-minute addition, I had my own room. I happened to have been placed next to the girls' rooms and the walls were thin, so I heard some pretty odd conversations. Right as I was about to sleep, I heard my name being mentioned next door, and so I did as any kid would. I turned amorphous and slid over to the wall within seconds to listen in. Turns out one of the girls in the group I was going around with had a crush on me for quite some time, and there was discussion about how the group could get her close to me. I knew at this point I was invading the privacy of these girls and shouldn't be listening in, as it wasn't the moral thing to do. After listening for another few minutes, the conversation changed, so I lost interest and went to bed, having quite a bit of information that I did not have before. When I awoke the next day, I knew I had to be prepared for just about anything. I showered, cleaning every crevice, brushed my teeth, 4 or 5 times, combed my hair, I had long-ass hair, threw on my Axe deodorant, it was popular at the time, and picked out the best-looking clothes I had in my luggage. Black shorts, obviously, as I knew I was going to be riding roller coasters and was a smart enough fellow to know not to wear light colours when you're planning to get jostled left and right. I made my way out. I met up with the group and decided we were going to grab some food before we hit the rides. I had a grilled cheese and finished before everyone else. Being the fatty I was, I decided I was going to get a fried pickle too. This is where things start to go bad. I overhear that the line for Space Mountain is almost an hour long. I get a little panicked as this was supposed to be our 3rd or 4th ride. I scarfed down the huge pickle, it was quite a sight, and proceed to give the news to my companions, to which they announced that we're going on Space Mountain first to avoid screwing up our momentum. We made our way to the line and we see it. It has exceeded the partitions and wrapped around one of the corners leading up to the building. Fuck. Spent about an hour in line making small talk, which isn't something I'm good at, and then something happens. My stomach gurgles. It was loud enough that it was misheard as me burping. This was very concerning, as we were within arm's reach of the end of the line, and I did not want to have wasted all this time. We get called up. Next! As we enter, I start sweating, and fortunately, the place is dim so nobody can see. We get to the ride and I'm getting ready to sit when one of the girls bumps past me, grabbing the place I was to sit. The only remaining seat was at the very front, next to the girl, the one who was mentioned the night before. I sit down, we share a nervous high, and the restraining bar comes back. It doesn't click. I'm thinking to myself, this is not good. I could fuck this up by being too big. I then think, hey, you're pretty flexible, you got this. You know what you gotta do. So I twist my leg and shove it forward until I hear a pop. Fuck. I may have just dislocated my hip. Bar still isn't locking. My smartass thinks, hey, you've already gone this far, so I take a deep breath and exhale, forcing my gut into my rib cage. Click. I breathe in and realize I made a mistake. Can't take more than a shallow breath without a bit of additional pain to add to the serious pain in my hip. I give the thumbs up to the equipment check dude and turn and smile at the girl. The ride starts, and I suddenly remember that something was wrong with my stomach. As we hit the first turn, I feel my stomach going the other way. The chilled air in my face was helping, but then we hit a loop, and I let out a squeak from the rear. It felt wet. Fuck. I sit petrified, in pain and fear the entire ride as we approach the exit point. The ride slows down and starts hitting the rolling pins and gears, every little bump sending a shiver up my spine. As the ride is about to come full stop, there's a click, but it doesn't sound right. It was like a gear tried turning but jumped instead. The bars don't come up. I'm just sitting there, possibly having a little Hershey's kiss in my shorts, starting to panic. Then I hear the operator call it over the speakers. Due to a slight problem, Space Mountain will need to be shut down for a short while. I hear the crowd outside complaining. They turn the lights on, and for a moment, I am distracted from my misery by the sight before me. Space Mountain in the light. That was a weird sight. It dropped down like 40 feet, and there were way more loops than I thought. Neat sight. They pull the ride into this side room that you can't see with the lights off, and one of the engineers jumps down to see what's wrong. He jiggles the release switch. Nothing. After about an hour, it occurs to me that I knew exactly what happened. I take a breath as much as I could, being that my lungs were being constricted, and breathe out, pushing my gut further in. At this point, I knew I'd just fucked up. My ass makes a noise that can only be described as a drunk moose trying to do a mating call. The entire room goes silent, not just any silence either. The kind of absence of sound where the silence has an echo. All the guys in the back lost it and started laughing uncontrollably. The ride, no longer pinned down by my gut, clicked free. I turn and the girl has her head turned away. I look back and the two girls behind me are glaring and their eyes are just beaming what the fuck. We get the okay to get up and leave. I wait for everyone else to go first. I ask the engineer if there's a bathroom I could use, and he points in the opposite direction. I stand up, forgetting what I had done to my hip, and fall face first into the cement. Arched over like the Eiffel Tower, I feel something start to slip and I clench, which, fortunately, pops my hip back in place. I do a bit of a twist to get up and waddle to the bathroom, with the certainty that I had just shit my pants. I get in there still clenched, undo my belt and drop my shorts, all while keeping clenched. And just unload in the toilet. Fastest shit I have ever taken. I'll avoid going into description, but I'll just say that there was a lot of it, and I was surprised. Now that I was no longer burdened, I do a scratch and sniff test on my shorts to see if I've ruined them. They were black and the bathroom had poor lighting, so it was the only way I could think of. But I was unfortunate. There was about a $50 clump. I quickly took some toilet paper and scraped it off, went over to the sink to try to at least clear any smells. The soap seemed to do a decent job, and my timing with the shit gave me a few minutes leeway to avoid suspicion. I feel I did a pretty good job, so I dry off my shorts at the hand dryer and throw them back on. I leave and meet back up with the group. Based on the time wasted, we had enough time for one more ride before we had to meet up and leave, so we decide on the Haunted Mansion. Seriously, the most awkward I have ever felt, and it really didn't help that nobody would make eye contact. We went on the elevator and nobody spoke. One of the girls got startled by the ghosts, but tried very hard not to make any noises. We get to the chair part where it turns into a bit of a ride, and I go to sit down with enough room for 2 others. The girls decide they'd rather sit as 4 in the chair behind instead of with me. Ride goes on, we get off, and we head to the buses. Long ride home. To this day I haven't talked with any of those people that I grew up with. I now have a serious phobia of shitting myself. 3. Obligatory, this happened a couple years ago. My husband and I got married in the early summer and, the next day, disembarked on a carnival cruise for our honeymoon. The cruise director started each morning with a morning show that was broadcast to each room. And the first morning I was awake early and called in and had a couple laughs with the cruise director, introducing myself and my husband, mentioning we're on our honeymoon, that my husband is hearing impaired, general conversation. We saw him later that day at some event and introduced ourselves more directly. He seemed like a really friendly and fun guy, which you'd have to be to get that kind of job, but still. A couple nights into our cruise, we've just had dinner and, of course, a couple drinks to go along with it. We wander to the theatre to see what kind of show was going on, and when we walk in we see that not only is the cruise director choosing couples for a newlywed game thing, but he sees us and asks the audience if they'd like us to participate, and everybody cheers us to the stage. Now, my husband is deaf, but has a cochlear implant which enables him to hear pretty well, but in certain conditions, such as sound coming from speakers, or after he's had a couple drinks, it seems to work a little less well than other times. The director/host asks some standard newlywed game type questions, suitably risque but not too much so for a family cruise. The most risque question was, "Where's the strangest place that you've made whoopee?" Now, I know my newlywed game history well enough to know that this question is infamous, and they got a few giggles out of the crowd just asking it, and I wasn't about to answer it in any kind of strange way, even if I could think of any real adventurous places we'd done the deed. I'm kind of vanilla, so sue me. The host asks me for my response and I say the ship. Kinda boring, but the truth. The director asks my husband for his response and he says Amsterdam. Now, I know what he was talking about, and had heard these stories from before we met, so I wasn't exactly shocked. He'd had some fun over in Europe. I probably wasn't thinking straight, and in my mind I was trying to be helpful, but I turned to him and said, "Honey, I've never been to Amsterdam." The audience cracked up, and the host lost it. My husband got totally red and started apologizing that he had misunderstood the question, but the damage was already done. The room was in stitches. When we get back to our room, it's even worse. The whole thing has been recorded and has started running on a loop, a dedicated channel in every cabin. For the rest of our honeymoon cruise, we were stopped by a number of couples who wanted to say that they'd seen us on the TV and ask how Amsterdam was, including at least a few that were very explicitly trying to get us into a cuck scene with them. They gave us a DVD of it on the last day before we got off the ship. 4. After my then husband and I got out of the army, that's where we met, we went to his place of birth, Puerto Rico. I got a job helping restore boats. This boat was a 200-foot freighter that the owner was going to turn into a pleasure boat. There were about 10 workers. We would start at 8 and break for lunch at noon. I was cleaning the railing and about halfway through when lunch was called, everyone went below deck, but I stayed to finish the part I was on. Now I should mention that this boat was on the hard, meaning it was lifted about 50 feet in the air over dry land. I was very happy with the sanding and polishing job and decided to join everyone else for lunch. Rag in hand, I swiped the rail with a huge smile on my face. I was in such a great mood. I swiped over a gate that had a broken latch. I watched the dust rag that was in my left hand float down the 50-foot drop towards a pile of sharp, jagged rocks. Feeling a sharp pain in my right thumb, I looked at my right hand. Yes, my right thumb, who I loved very much, was pinched between the gate and the outside rail, keeping my body from crashing onto the rocks below. I would love to say that my life flashed before my eyes, but no. Fight mode kicked in. I did not waste time to call for help. I pressed hard against my good buddy Missy's right thumb and looked at my left arm and asked it in my mind, "Why are you not helping?" At that moment, good left arm did not want to die either. So it swung itself up and wrapped around the inner rail, crushing my right thumb harder. Not ashamed to say I screamed like I was giving birth. Not that anyone heard me. Right hand let go and I heaved my body onto the deck, pulling with all the fight to live I had. Well, it worked. Otherwise there would have been headlines. I looked down at what could have been my final resting place, shook my head, held my right thumb to my heart, and went down below to my boss with no colour in my face and shakily told him to fix the fucking latch on the gate. He took me to a nearby bar, and I decided I really like Irish whiskey. 5. So last year Halloween fell on a Monday, and due to my work schedule I was unable to do anything on Halloween night. In lieu of this, my friends and I decided to plan an outing the Friday before. One of my buds, let's call him T, was dating a young lady who was working at the Los Angeles Haunted Hayride, out in Griffith Park, and she offered us a friend and family discount if we showed up and mentioned her name. We figured it would be something to do, as none of us could afford to go to some fancy Hollywood party. So prior to the event, T invites us over to his house to hang out and eat dinner prior to carpooling over to the event. We also decided to smoke a little weed before going, as it would make the event more fun. At the time, I should note, I had not heard what the theme of the event was, but from what T's lady friend was telling me, it was supposed to be some sort of carnival theme. So we're on the road to the hayride and I'm chilling in the back seat of my roommate's car, who was driving us. Let's call him R. We're listening to NPR and each trying to mimic the average NPR host recounting a story, but to a more comedic effect. I'm giggling my ass off as the euphoria is kicking in and not really thinking about where we're going. We arrive at the event and find parking near the main entrance to the carnival grounds. We mention the lady's name and we get a discount, score, and walk in. This is when I notice that this isn't just some carnival with a haunted hayride, but the entire place is a haunted carnival featuring clowns. Lots and lots of clowns. Now, I don't like clowns, never have. But I genuinely try not to hold my childhood fears against people who make balloon animals and attempt to make people laugh. But these weren't those types of clowns. At this point, I'm trying my damnedest not to show my fear, but the mix of my own anxiety and the drug-induced paranoia is not making things any easier. We slowly make our way to the line for the hayride, passing various clowns that seem to have sprung from my darkest fears. Finally, we make it to the line for the hayride, which is surprisingly long. We stand in line for what feels like 30 minutes, and we get maybe halfway to the front of the line when I see her. This short person, I couldn't tell with makeup, dressed up like a little clown girl who was holding a fire axe and staring at me. This clown girl locks eyes with me, and she starts to grin and skip towards me in the strangest way possible, twirling the axe with glee. I can't stop watching. And I'm sort of immobilized at this point due to fear and, well, weed. Needless to say, the clown girl comes right up to the line and stands just a few feet away from me, not once unlocking her gaze on me. The line moves and she moves with it. I'm not having a good time. I think the clown girl caught on because she eventually wandered off to creep on someone else, but the damage is done at this point. My paranoia is running deep. I can see clowns everywhere, each with their weapons and gleeful expressions. This is my nightmare. I suddenly have the deathly urge to pee, not sure where it came from, but I tell my friends to hold my spot in line, for some odd reason, while I wander off to find the bathroom. Strategically avoiding all the clowns, I made my way to an attendant, not dressed up, and ask them where to find the bathroom. The attendant points me to a bathroom not far away from the entrance to the carnival grounds, and my short trip begins. The bathroom is actually a collection of bathrooms, like a building of bathrooms, between one of the parking lots and the carnival grounds. I trot over and find an unused bathroom to use and go in. It's at this exact point that my mind goes into some sort of cinematic mode, not sure. The bathroom looks like one of those rest stop bathrooms you see in horror films, like Rest Stop for example, complete with a flickering light. I whiz and take a moment to collect myself before venturing back into the clown-infested carnival. I knew it would be scary for me, but I figured why not face my fears? Who knows, it may help me in the long run. So I opened the door to the outside world, only to be greeted by a clown. Now thinking back, this was probably just one of the actors or actresses using the bathroom on their break. But in my current state of mind, all I see in front of me is a killer clown. I let out a shriek and run past them. I'm no longer in, hey, let's go to a fun Halloween event and be merry mode. I'm in survival mode. I flee down the road past the parking lots and follow the lights leading me down from the top of Griffith Park. To most that may not know the area, it's a somewhat forested and hilled area of town that has hiking trails and even an old zoo. I'm sprinting at this point, thinking I'm being hunted by killer clowns running by small groups of people who probably think I'm nuts. I made it to the bottom of a hill, and it's at this point I think I'm safe. I suddenly realize I have no freaking clue where I am. There are no lights in this area, and I'm walking down some road with no destination in sight. At this point, I've given up on returning to the carnival grounds, as I figure it would be too late for me to make it to the event, and even if I did, my friends would probably just mock me for chickening out. I pull out my phone, 11% battery FYI, to get a lift, but the Wi-Fi is preventing them from finding my location. Okay. New plan. I open Google Maps to try locate my position, and it gives me a vague reading, but I believe I know the general area of where I am, and if I only follow this one road, it should lead me to a main road in which I can call a car. So I start jogging down this hill in pitch black, trying to find the main road, and I'm not seeing any cars or people at all, which is fairly strange. This seems like it would be a popular event. This all doesn't add up, so I decide to reopen Google Maps and double check. Well, my phone is now at 5%, since I kept Google Maps on. Fuck! Okay, let's run. I'm running down the hill and I see an intersection of sorts coming up. So I sprint towards it and open my phone up to call the lift. Boom, I think I'm home free, right? 3%. I get a call from the lift driver saying he is where my dot is, but he doesn't see me. I don't see him either, so we try to figure it out. 2%. He tells me that I may be on a one-way road and that he will have to circle back to find me. So I decide to double back and go back up the hill towards where I think he is. 1%. I went the wrong way. So now my phone's dead. I'm in the middle of a dark road that I've never been in, and I have a lift driver trying to find me. This is a horror movie. I give up on the lift driver and go back to my original plan of going downhill to find a main road, thinking this is my best guess, and lo and behold I see a car. Not the car that my lift driver was said to be driving, but a different one. I decide not to run past them because then it'll just look weird. So I slow it down to a walk, trying my best not to look like a freaked out stoner. Too late. The car drives past me and pulls up to the side of the road. In my fear I think that maybe, just maybe, there is a possibility that Clown Girl can drive. Then suddenly a woman's voice says, "Hey, you okay?" I decide not to be creepy and yell back, "Yeah, but I'm kinda lost." The woman calls me over to the car and I slowly walk. I figure I probably look creepy out here all by myself, so I alert her in my most friendly voice. "Oh, by the way, I'm not like a serial killer or anything." Great idea, Jaime. Thankfully, she doesn't drive away immediately, but her friend, another girl, gets out of the car to watch me closely. She asks, "So, what are you doing out here?" I decide that it's best to just be honest and maybe they can get me out of this. "I'm stoned and afraid of clowns and got lost outside the haunted hayride," I tell them. The two bust up laughing and offer me a ride back up the hill, since they are going that way. I told them that I didn't want to go back into the carnival, obviously, but if they just dropped me off at the top of the hill, I could probably figure something out. They obliged, and they did, only for me to find the lift driver still searching for me along the way. I thanked the ladies immensely and got my Lyft driver to take me home. Finally entering my apartment, and after charging my phone for a bit in the lift, I get a call from R asking me where I was, because they just made it to the front of the hayride line. I was lost for about 30 minutes. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Embarrassing Stories, episode 57. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If anyone's wondering, because I was a bit confused myself, but I had to look it up, and turns out I was one of the few people who didn't know that the 88 thing, with the letters HH, it actually stands for Heil Hitler. So, yeah, so that is something I learned today. Shut up. Yes, we can all hear you barking. Okay, with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.